Okay, today I'm going to be in a birth. You go by one specific aspect and you do not take into account the other placements that may be conjunct, trine, in opposition, or square to it, or have any, or if any of the planets sit in an enemy house or sit in a friendly house, it's going to change the aspect of that particular sign. Say, for instance, you have Jupiter in Pisces. If you have Jupiter in Pisces and happens to be conjunct your ascendant, or it happens to be sitting in the fourth house, either one of those aspects can totally change how Jupiter in Pisces is expressed. If it's in the fourth house, it's going to give um, a more positive expression in that house due to your home. Like you'll expand your home, you'll buy a new home, you'll buy new cars. You'll have a more spiritual sense in that home because that's also a home of the grave, which means that you may get visions, you may get um, experiences and stuff that you might not normally get if Jupiter is in a different house and in that particular sign. And that's the moon sitting in the fourth house in Pisces, both water signs. It is trine. That would make that a friendly house. Say, for instance, you had your third house was in Scorpio. Third house is ruled by Gemini. That would make it in conjunct. Say you had Mars in there. Mars and Gemini are both enemy planets. Yes, they're sextile, but it's considered an enemy planet in ancient astrology. So you not only do you have an in conjunction with your third house being in Scorpio, it's also has an enemy inside it. So that means your Mars is not going to function like most other people's Mars. It's going to be restricted in the worst possible way. It's going to cause you issues in that house. It's going to give you aggressive speech. You're going to be violent. You're going to have aspects in that third house that are going to be unsatisfactory until you can learn how to use those energies in a more positive way. And if a malefic is attached to it in any kind of way, it's going to make it more malefic. People say, oh, well, energies, this, that, and the other. Malefic planets are malefic planets. I don't care how you look at it. The ancients looked at it that way. And to me, the whole Western take on there's no bad planets or there's no nothing malefic or nothing negative. No, that's not true because if you look around in life, you can see where those malefic planets actually take effect in your life, whether or not you understand it or whether or not you actually admit that that's what's happening, that's what's happening. It can express in many other ways, but that's just the way it is. If you have, say, for instance, you have Saturn in the 12th, according to Vedic, you can have Saturn, say it's in Cancer or whatever, you can have Saturn in Cancer in the 12th. Saturn is in a good position in the 12th house, according to Vedic. In Western, it's considered malefic. It all just depends on how you look at it. One's a lunar chart, one's a solar chart. It's all on how it's approached and whether they're looking at the lunar chart or they're looking at the solar chart. Western astrology is solar charts. Vedic is lunar charts. Any planet that you have conjunct your descendant is going to show you what type of person or people that you attract in your life. Say you have, let's say you have Aquarius on your descendant. you're going to attract more people that are humanitarian, odd, rebellious, don't fit the social norm. That's the type of person that you're going to attract. It being in the seventh house and the Ascendant. Now, if there's any other planet attached to it, conjunct, trine, opposition, or square, it's going to change the way it's expressed. If it is trine, it's going to give positive results as long as it's in a friendly house. Considering the seventh house is ruled by Libra, as long as it is in an air sign or Saturn in Capricorn, it will be aspected in a positive way. If it has if it's squared, it would have Aries in there. It would have Mars, and which would square it, and which would cause friction, which would cause fights with friends, fights with spouse, fights in other areas. You might have to fight courts because seventh house also rules law and legal binding contracts. So you might have trouble with legal binding contracts or law. If you have ninth house and your ninth house is in Gemini, it's in opposition to the house lord, which makes it a enemy house, which means say you have Mercury in the ninth house, it's going to make your speech more aggressive. It's going to be less logical. It's also going to cause it issues with communication, people not understanding your point of view because it's in opposition. If it's attached to a malefic like Saturn, it's really going to hinder travel, your communication. It's going to also change your views politically because Jupiter rules judges, courts, political arenas, and also rules travel. Jupiter is anything that's beneficial. If it has Saturn in there, and which is an enemy, it's going to cause issues in that department. It's going to cause restrictions and delays. But Saturn does not always have delays and does not always have restrictions. After you're 30 years old, after your first Saturn return, Saturn tends to let up on the restrictions that you have. As long as that you've learned your lesson, Saturn is pretty lenient and you pretty much for the most part don't have to worry a whole bunch about Saturn. Unless it's in an opposing sign, like it's going into, like currently, it's in Capricorn, any cardinal sign or is going to feel restrictions. If it's in a fixed sign, those particular signs in general, the fixed signs in general, at that time period will feel restriction and restraint. If it's in, say, for instance, Sagittarius, which is opposed to Gemini, it's going to give Gemini and Pisces, well, it's going to give Gemini issues extremely bad. Pisces, it's going to be neutral because Jupiter actually rules Pisces in ancient astrology. It's going to give neutral results. In Sagittarius, it's going to make it more difficult, actually. It's not going to make, it's going to give it restrictions. You may change jobs. You may change what you're doing. You may limit your travel. If it's in Virgo, it's going to cause pretty much the same restrictions that it gives Gemini because they're both ruled by Mercury. If you have, say you have Scorpio in the 11th house, 11th house is ruled by Uranus. You have Scorpio, it's going to cause an opposition. It's going to make that house more internalized instead of more external, and which is going to cause issues with groups, corporations. It's more malefic. Scorpio, Pluto is a malefic sign, like Mars. Mars is malefic, Pluto is malefic, Saturn. Mercury can be malefic or benefic. So can Venus. It can be both. It can be more malefic or benefic, or it can be neutral depending on the sign and the characteristics that it sets with. Now, you can't just go in and say, well, hey, this doesn't seem right in my chart, or this doesn't seem right in my chart. You have to look at the house. You have to look at the energy that is expressed in that house. You have to also look what is trine, what is conjunct, what is squared or opposition. You have to see if is it in a tight conjunction to a major point in your chart, being the IC, MC, ascendant or descendant. Is it on one of those points? Is it close to, is it in a cadent house? Is it in a house that may cause heavy restrictions? Every one of these houses are realms of the universe, which means in each one of these houses, it's not just water houses. Water just carries memory. Each one of these houses can have one of the four clairs, and which means that you can use your psychic ability. You can have an ability to sense different things, and it can happen in any of the houses because all these houses are houses of heaven, and you have to look and see how it is aspected. Now, there's certain aspects, like I've said before, if it's malefic, you're going to have to overcome that malefic aspect in your chart. It may take some people, 5-10 years. It may take people their whole life trying to get over it. It just all depends on how it's aspected in your chart. And there may be something in your chart that causes your 10th house or your 6th house or your 1st house is not a complete determination on what you're going to do with your life. You have to look at the different aspects on how they all work together. One particular aspect is not going to change your whole chart. One particular aspect is not going to determine your life in general and how it moves forward. Also, free will is not able to be calculated in a chart. There is nothing in that chart that puts free will in there. And also, we have the chaos factor because the world was created in chaos. And then we have law. And you have to put the two. They're going to go between two oppositions, between chaos, what we can't control, and law in us, where we can try to keep our life with a certain amount of control. And these two are going to play back and forth, kind of like Gemini. It's going to go from one extreme to the other, and that's the way it is your whole life. And that's where free will cannot be determined, because the chaos factor, the law factor, there are different things that determine what goes into your birth chart. And also, what's in your birth chart can be changed. Nothing is set in stone. This is what you signed up for, but everything is subject to change, and it does change, and there is a possibility to become greater. There is also a possibility to stay the same. It's all up to you. I would like to say thank you for listening to my aspects in your birth chart. I'll be doing more videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the little notifications button down at the bottom. And thank you for listening.